Hello, and welcome to the All Things Narrative Podcast, where we explore the relationships between the stories we love and the stories we live. I'm your host, Derek Hatch, and welcome back to another Transparent Tuesday. Woo! And so, if you joined us in our last episode, you heard me start this series about changing your personal narrative. And so, part one, I shared about how music and the arts can really influence us in doing this. And if you haven't checked out that episode, feel free to go do so right now and then catch up and join us with this one here. But for those of you who are ready for part two, today we are talking about the influence of relationships, of friends, of family, etc., and helping us to change our personal narrative. So just to recap real quick, we have these narratives, these stories that we tell ourselves about our experiences. And when we tell ourselves these stories and we tell them to others as well, there's a sense of meaning that we're deriving from them. And so it's very important for us to be aware of how we perceive ourselves and the lives that we're living. And thinking of our lives through the lens of story can really help us be intentional about seeing where it has gone and where we want it to go as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and hop back into it now. All right, the second story that I have for you is about 5 years later. So this is the fall of 2013. And at this point, I was a recent college graduate. I had got my bachelor's in ministry, and I was also recently engaged to my future wife. This was a really, optimistic season where I was like, yes, I'm getting married, and yes, let's go. Gonna go find a job because that's what you do. You graduate with your bachelor's degree, then you go find a job out in the world with, what you love and all that stuff, right? Nope. The good news is the getting married part did happen the next year. So that's great. But the job part is what I really want to focus on here. So I thought that with a bachelor's degree, foolish me, I'd be able to find a job right away in my degree. Anyone been there before? And the job that I was working at the time is I worked in, like cleaning and facilities and maintenance at a church and school. And, it's work that I was grateful for. It was a minimum wage job, but it helped. I was still living at home at that time with my parents, so I didn't have a lot of bills. But I started to see that, I was starting to get stuck in this rut. I was in this job, and I thought at the time, like, okay, now the doors are going to open and I'm going to get out of this job and get into something else. And I thought maybe, because my degree was in ministry, I was like, well, maybe this church that I'm working at will actually hire me for ministry and I'll get to do that. And then when I started to realize that that wasn't going to happen, then I started to look outside of there. And I started to apply for different jobs, jobs at, foster care homes, jobs, youth ministry jobs. And I applied, I went to the state of Washington, Linden, Washington. And I went and, I interviewed for a job there and paid my own money for a plane ticket and, stayed up there for a few days trying to land this job, only for me to not know how I did the whole time I was there. Then to come home and awaiting me was a letter. I was like, oh, wow, this must be it. They were supposed to be able to let me know. And of course, I didn't get the job. And I was like, really? You could have told me while I was there. I had my hopes up that whole week. And I was applying for a job in Florida, where my wife was going to school at the time. And it's a funny story because the job I applied for in Florida is actually a job I got 2 years later, but I didn't get it at the time. So I was applying for all these jobs and just not getting anywhere. And I started to realize that I didn't know what was going to happen in my future. And that was scary because you make these plans in life and you're so certain that those plans are going to work out a certain way. And the clock is ticking. I know I'm getting married and I know that I need to be able to provide. And, my wife is going to, at the time she's going to be a nurse and graduate nursing school, but it was going to take a while for her to take her tests and get a job. And so I knew that the burden fell on me and I had to try to figure this out and nothing was working. And I kind of looked at this rut that I was in California, and I took a trip over to Florida to go visit my fiance. And I went to go visit Tori, and while I was there, I just met a lot of people, different jobs, different churches. And I just started meeting and talking to people and realizing, just entertaining the notion, what if I come and set up life here and work here? What would that look like? I thought about that. And I thought about how my wife, my wife-to-be was finding connections out there. And she was having a lot of prospects, if you will, where she could have potentially gotten a good job. And I looked at my situation in California and I looked at Florida and I kind of said, what would it look like? Now, this would be crazy, but what would it look like if I dropped everything in California? If I passed off my responsibilities at work, my volunteer responsibilities at a youth recovery place, and I started a new chapter in Florida and took that step of faith, if you will, that leap. And eventually I got to the point where I'm like, well, why not? I'll probably never get another chance again in my life to where I could do this. And I wasn't sure of it though, until a friend took me out to Starbucks. I kind of told him, I literally had like a pros and cons chart that I had for staying in California versus going to Florida. And I talked and rambled like I always do. And he just listens politely. And then he just looks at me and he says, okay, Derek, this is the one question that you need to answer. Security or adventure? Safety or risk? And I remember thinking that security and adventure were two things that really pushed heavy in my heart with this. And he said, what do you ultimately want? Security or adventure? And that question of what we want is so important with our narratives. Because we'll talk about in future episodes how a character wants something, right? And they have to overcome some sort of conflict to get that. And so for me, I wanted the adventure because I was in this monotony of life where maybe things were a little secure, but I was like, what would happen if I did this? If I moved, and I never imagined myself leaving SoCal. So this was huge for me. This was not an easy step. And after that conversation, that word adventure just kept weighing on my heart. And I realized that that's what I wanted to do. So I packed up my Nissan Versa with everything I could take. And this wonderful guy, Arturo, shout out to you. He flew from Florida, and he knew Tori out there. And crazy thing about Arturo is he actually became my brother-in-law. So how cool is that? That he was family long before officially becoming family. And he came and he drove out with me. He took the adventure and we drove cross country from California to Florida. And he helped me get settled in. And my wife was still living at school at the time. And those were the only people I knew. And then I had another wonderful couple that I had met a couple times, Ryan and Lindsay, shout out to you. And I got to live with them for the first 5 months that I was there. I was looking, I got a job working at a hotel at the Breakers, and it took a long time to actually get that ministry job. But I was there and I was in the adventure of it. And it was hard. I'll talk another episode about how hard of a season this was for me. But I was living the adventure and I was living a new narrative. And that was scary. But now that I look back on it, I'm so grateful for that time. So friends are great. We need friends in our lives that are going to challenge our narratives, that are going to help us to move into the next step, even if we're hesitant to. So thank you to all the people that helped me take that step. And so as we close, there's something in narrative practices called remembering, which is very helpful when it comes to relationships. So like it's like re-membering, like you're looking at, if you think of your life as like a club or an association or whatever metaphor you want to use, and you think about everybody as a member of that. And to remember means to kind of reevaluate where they are in that membership and to be able to meaningfully engage with people. And so that's a lot of what I want to do with this business here. And so take a second and think about somebody that was really influential in changing your personal narrative. You know, I shared about two people. I shared about the friend that I met with at Starbucks and gave me that kind of challenge. Was also a good listener. And then I had the other friend who actually was there to meet me to make that challenge happen. And then I talked about Ryan and Lindsay as well, the friends that, you know, had me stay with them for months so that I could be able to, you know, figure this whole thing out and where I was going. And so think about who that person is. Could be a friend, could be a family member, and maybe take some time this week just to connect with them. Maybe make a video. You maybe make a video for them. You could script it out. Maybe you can write them a letter or a text or an email and just let them know, you know, the ways that they've contributed to your life meaningfully. I do quite a bit of this when it comes to, you know, talking about what we want in life and relationships and memberships and stuff like that in my 6-week workshop called Live a Meaningful Story. And so this is like my flagship workshop where I give you the best of what I got over 6 weeks. And so this is great for booking with groups, whether this is you know, schools, churches, businesses, organizations, communities, nonprofits, whatever you can think of. I'm more than happy to figure out how to make it work with you, as I so believe in this. And you get this awesome like guidebook where you get to fill it out and you get to kind of journey through your life story and being able to think about that with a group of people that are there to support you as well. And, you know, I do other, you know, I could do individualized workshops as well about relationships and how to listen using tools such as witnessing, where it teaches us how to, you know, really sit back and listen to what's going on in our relationships. And so if you're interested in any of that stuff with workshops or one-on-one coaching, feel free to go to allthingsnarrative.com. You can reach out to me there. We can do a free 15-minute consultation. We could also converse over social media and even email me. My email is Derrick, Derrick, H at allthingsnarrative.com. That's Derrick H at allthingsnarrative.com. And next Transparent Tuesday, we will do the final story within this series of Changing Your Personal Narrative, which will focus on the spiritual and the metaphysical and dreams and all kinds of wonderful stuff. So it's going to be a good time. So join us there for that and take care.